Welcome everyone to another episode of the Black Beauty Activist Podcast, where we discuss critical conversations to help increase the consciousness and confidence of Black women. And today's episode is one that is very touchy. It's one that I was just talking to my guest and I was telling her that I'm a little bit nervous about having this conversation, but it's one that definitely needs to be had. I know that I'm not the only one who's dealt with quote unquote mama trauma. I'm not the only person that's had to, detach themselves from certain people in their family because of certain situations. But it's still a very, very sensitive topic. And I know a lot of people have a difficult time talking about these kinds of things, but that's what this podcast is for, is to have these critical conversations where we can talk about some things that'll be able to help us grow, be able to help us raise our consciousness, be able to help us become better, empower us. That's really what I'm all about. But for those of you that don't know me, if you have not been watching the Black Beauty Activist podcast, my name is Dr. Tameka Ellison. I'm your host. I'm actually a fashion scholar. I'm an author. I'm an empowerment speaker and a lover of all things Black culture and empowerment. And we're going to be talking about healing today. We're going to be talking about healing. And you know what's really funny? Typically, when I'm doing my podcast, my I have two cats who are brothers. They were born at the same time, twin cats. And typically, whenever I'm doing my podcast, not like neither one of them are usually around, but for some reason today, my one cat, my lover cat, his name is Patch. Patch is sitting right here next to me. He probably knows that I need him right now. He probably knows that that little bit of warmth that he provides will be of service to me today as we talk about these touchy topics. But this past Christmas that we just had, this past Christmas, I saw my mother for the first time in 4.5 years. This was the second time that we had been estranged. The first time that we've been estranged was about a year-long stint of time. The second time around was about 4.5 years that we were estranged. There are several elements, of course, that sparked both of those estrangements, but the main crux of both of those was the fact that I was living with a parent who never really knew how to be happy about my successes. My mother, she had me when she was 16. She had my brother when she was 17, had my sister when she was 21. Unfortunately, she had to raise us on her own because my dad was an inconsistent part of our lives because of the fact that he was suffering from alcoholism, which eventually led to drugs, which then eventually also led to him having to go to prison for 15 years. And so my mom, raising us on her own as a young woman, as a teenage mother, trying to figure it all out. And I could only imagine, what life was like for her, trying to raise three little kids, and she's just a kid herself. But there were so many things, as I grew up that attributed to the fact that I wanted a different life. And so I purposefully sought out to have a different life. I purposefully sought out to do something different than what I saw around me. In particular, getting my education was a big deal to me. I really wanted to go to school. Because I felt like me going to school and getting an education was going to be my way out of poverty. And it really was. It was my way of getting out of the inner city of Cleveland. It was my way of getting out of my neighborhood to give me an opportunity to see something besides what I saw in my neighborhood. And it really, being educated really changed my life in many ways. It changed my life for so many good reasons, but then it also changed my life for so many reasons that are so challenging. And my mother is wrapped up into that. Unfortunately, she's always had a difficult time with the fact that she has a daughter who is PhD educated. She has a difficult time with our relationship because she feels like she can't relate to me. She, at the first time when we were estranged, my mother and I, when we finally did talk again, she admitted to me that she was having a hard time with our relationship because she felt like she wasn't good enough to be my mother because of the fact that I had gone through, got educated and all these things, which, I never told her anything to the sort. But, you know, me becoming an educated Black woman was a catch 22 for me. Um, it took me to places I never thought I would go to. I was able to travel around the world, doing research, doing all these amazing things, and I'm still traveling. As many of you all know, I'm on tour right now with my book, Black Hair in a White World. But it also was such a challenge because I was the black sheep in my family. So not only did I have a troubled relationship with my mom, but I had a troubled relationship with other people in my family because I come from an uneducated family. I come from a family where survival is the main uh, source of what people strive for. And anything beyond survival is typically not within my family's peripheral. And so it's been a challenge. It's been wonderful, but it's been such a challenge. And I had to really make it up in my mind what type of relationship I was going to have with my mom and the rest of my family. And that's still in the development stages, especially because my mom and I just now reconnected again, like I said, after 4.5 years. I'm still trying to figure this thing out. I don't really know what kind of relationship I want to have with my mom, but it will never be the same like it was before the estrangement. And what I can say is that I've healed so much in that amount of time. I've evolved into a different person. And one of the things that I will say is that my tolerance level for toxicity is on level zero. And so, if anybody, it doesn't matter who it is, if it's my mom, my siblings, my friends, whoever it might be, if you're not bringing joy, happiness, support, love into my life, I don't want anything else. And I'm not giving anything else. Only thing I'm giving is love, support, and happiness. That's what I'm giving. I don't want anything else. If you have toxicity to give, then you can't be a part of my life, not on a consistent basis. And so I've made up my mind that that's the way that I want to live my life. But um, with mama trauma, oftentimes we have to seek out help. And my next guest, she has served as that help for many Black women. She is a transformational coach who empowers Black women to break free from the cycle of generational maternal abuse. Activists, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Miss Dani Ellison. Hi, Dani.
Hi, Dr. Tameka Ellison. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to read your bio so that the people can know a little bit more about what you're doing with the work with coaching women. And so, Dani, she helps to guide her clients through transformational healing and total recovery after they go no contact with abusive, narcissistic mothers. Wow. Just in that sentence right there is a lot, is a lot. Let me read that again. Dani helps to guide clients through transformative healing and total recovery after they go not no contact with abusive narcissistic mothers. Her signature one-to-one coaching framework incorporates exposure therapy, inner child healing, and a culture. How do you pronounce that? A cultural acupuncture, is that
Yes,
right?
auricular acupuncture.
Auricular acupuncture to shift you from traumatized to thriving. Wow. I'm going to make sure that I post Dani's website in the description so that you all can get access to her. But her website is ellisoninc.com. I'll make sure that I put that in the show notes. So for anybody that would like to get in touch with her, if you feel like you need some therapy, if you feel like need a coach to help you move beyond any trauma that you've dealt with your parents or with your mom in particular, Dani can definitely help you do that. But it's a pleasure to have you on. And I was telling Dani just a moment ago because I was trying to remember, like, how did I even get in touch with her, or how did we even connect? And the way that we connected, I actually saw her on YouTube. She was on another podcast. I can't recall what the podcast was, but she was speaking with someone, another Black woman, about this Black woman's experiences going no contact with her mother. And it was so powerful. The conversation was so powerful that I said, you know what, I got to talk to her too. Because so many people are dealing with this. A lot of people don't like to talk about it because when we think about family, we think about the fact that we're supposed to be supported by our family. And it's hard for us to come to grips with the fact that that may not always be the case. And so I'm going to go ahead and ask a few questions of Dani, and hopefully we can start to break down, some of these things. And so my first question to you is, can you just tell us a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up? What was that like for you?
Sure. So I'm originally from Oakland, California, and we have some similarities. I think there's a different twist on our stories, but a lot of overlap. My mother had me when she was 20, and my father went to prison when I was about 6 months old.
Mm.
And so he was in for 5 years. So for the first 5 years, I pretty much remember being happy, sort of having this blissful existence. I do have memories from early childhood and just remembering that my mother and I were happy. And then around 5 years old, just before I turned 5, my dad came home, and everything in my life was turned upside down. Everything went haywire. Just in the span of that first year, I was exposed to, vulgarity, sex in some ways, indirectly, domestic violence, and my innocence was just shattered as a result of seeing my parents interacting with each other. And um, within that first year, my parents had, it was actually right around my 5th birthday. We were headed to Disneyland for my birthday, and they got into a fight. It became physical. And as a result of that, my mother tried to cause a car accident.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I was in the front seat. I was awake, and I remember the entire incident from start to finish. And from there, I watched my father beat her after recovering the car. And then we went on to Disneyland, and I was expected to play the role of a happy 5-year-old. I felt afraid. I felt afraid to really show that I was uncomfortable, that I was frightened, that I was traumatized. I was aware that I had to sort of play along to ease the tension between my parents and avoid another outburst. And so from that point on, I was really an adult in many ways. I took over. I realized that I could not trust either of my parents on a fundamental level. And so the near death experience, the trauma of being disillusioned about my parents was the cocktail that resulted in some repressed memories, my trauma responses, my coping mechanisms all came to the surface from about 5 years old up until I moved out when I was 18. I was surviving. Um, and so around 8 years old, we moved away from California and we moved to the East Coast. And it was pretty much just my mother and myself most of the time. I'm an only child, so I was the golden child. I was the middle child. I was the scapegoat. I got all of it. And, you know, with that said, as an only child growing up with my mother, we actually were very close in a toxic way. Um, very much emotionally enmeshed, very much codependent on one another. And it took me until my mid 20s, after having moved out, gone to college, moved on from there, and started working and had my own place, to even realize that our relationship was abusive, to realize that she had been abusing me that entire time. And that around 24 years old started my healing work. I got into therapy, started to sort of get some diagnosis so I could understand what was going on and what I was really experiencing. And then at 26, 27, our relationship just came to a head. I was overworked. I was being exploited in the workplace, already sort of experiencing this overwhelming traumatic immersive experience because I was very much an overachiever. I had to achieve to be seen, that I had to achieve to be loved by my parents. And so I went just above and beyond to be recognized by my family all through college. Um, I've won national poetry awards, been on stage at Carnegie Hall, went to college in the Empire State Building, worked for Scholastic, worked for Nickelodeon. I felt that I had to stack up these accolades because it was the only thing that seemed to spark my parents' interest in me. And I learned that very, very early on. And so I was working as an assistant principal, and and I was one of very few Black women in the workplace. So hopefully that's already ringing bells. We know that that is typically dysfunctional and oppressive environment for Black women. And one day I was arguing with my mother via text message. Not arguing is a generous word, I think. She received the birthday card that I sent to her and didn't like it. It wasn't good enough. And so she texted me and said, "You suck." And that was my breaking point. That was the needle on the haystack for me. That was just, I realized that I could not show up to my life, that I couldn't strive to be this best version of myself and make space for someone who would disrespect me and humiliate me routinely. And so, yeah, I blocked her number and started my no contact journey.
Now, what I want to find out is, what was it that got you started into therapy? Because first off, as a Black woman, Black people, period, we are not conditioned to want to go to therapy. Most of us, most Black people don't do therapy for various reasons. But it sounds like, from what you're telling me, that you actually started going to therapy at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
So what got you started in wanting to go into therapy?
Well, my trigger to go to therapy, I remember like it was yesterday. I was 24 and I had just bought my first house.
Good for you. At 24?
Thank you. Yes, that was that overachievement, right?
Mm.
Not to discredit what I have done, but I remember the process was so stressful because I had to do it on my own.
Yeah.
To get emotional support from my mother while going through the financial ins and outs, and she was not supportive, like the opposite of supportive. She told me it was stupid for me to want to buy a house. I don't know who told you can buy a house or why you even thought that you should be doing that. So once it was all said and done, I had my furniture moved in, paint on the walls, everything was moved in and I felt settled. I just remember looking around my house and I just broke. I just started sobbing. And it just came to the surface like, wow, I'm actually safe. I'm actually safe now. it felt like I had been holding my breath since I was 5, since that attempted car accident. It felt like I took a deep breath and I couldn't release it until I was away from my mother, until I was safely on my own. And even in between that, my journey has been like one immersive trauma from the next, because I went to college. I chose to go to a predominantly white institution. So I was one of only like a handful of brown people, period, not even all of them Black. And I felt it. They made sure that I felt it. I was the only Black woman in my graduating class. And it was important to me to show up and be that positive statistic for my people, just to represent where I come from in that space. But it took a toll on me emotionally. So that coming together of my house represented some freedom, some safety, and some security. Also, at that time, I hadn't seen my mother for quite a while. I hadn't seen her since at least a couple of years. So I was starting to accumulate some of those benefits of being away from my abuser, of having some distance, even though we were still in a relationship. But when it surfaced, I just knew this is not something that's normal. This is not something that I can get perspective on by myself. I at least need to run these experiences by someone else to gain greater clarity about what actually happened. And within my first few sessions, my therapist confirmed that I had PTSD. And that was just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this whole scenario of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, many of us also suffer from that when we grow up with toxic parents or a toxic environment. I also deal with that as well. Still see my therapist every month, like clockwork. Um, it's difficult, but what's amazing is that at such a young age, you had enough wherewithal to know that you needed help. You know, I didn't start going to therapy until I was like in my 30s. Um, but the fact that you knew at such a young age that you needed some help is just wonderful. And my my next question to you is, being that you chose no contact, do you feel like that was the only way that you can maintain some of your sanity, was by just going all the way no contact? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. No contact really chose me. It took time for me to see that, but on some level, I always knew that. In fact, since I was 5, I knew on some level I made a conscious decision that I had to get away from my parents to feel safe as a
Mhm.
baby.
Yeah.
So for some of us, low contact is a feasible option. But for others of us who have malignant narcissistic parents who are actively abusive, no contact is the only way to stay safe. And anything less than no contact is a compromise.
Mm,
Some of us can maintain low contact, say if we have great distance, we live across the country or in another country, different city from our family. Maybe our mother's a little older. Sometimes low contact is an acceptable boundary, but for those of us who still have most of our lives ahead of us, and our mother has demonstrated a habitual, intentional cycle of of harm toward us, no contact is the only way that we can be liberated.
yeah. You know, as I mentioned in the introduction, I just started back talking to my mom. We have been separated for about 4.5 years. And to be honest with you, that was some of the most peaceful time in my life. There was no drama going on. I didn't have to deal with, unnecessary heartbreaks. Um, and I had to figure out, did I want to reintroduce her back into my life? And to be honest, the only reason why I did it was because my children were missing out on getting to know their grandmother. So I have two boys, and because of the fact that I hadn't seen my mom in 4.5 years, my boys also hadn't seen their grandmother in 4.5 years. And so I decided that I wanted to reintroduce her so that the kids could have some kind of a relationship, with her. She's the only grandmother that they have left. Their dad's mom has passed away. And so they don't have that grandmother. And so I thought it was important that they at least know, who she is and that kind of thing. But I believe what you call low contact. Can you explain what that is? Can you explain low contact?
Sure. Low contact is a middle ground between being fully engaged in a relationship with your parent and being absolutely no contact. So that might involve limited time in person or on the phone. It might involve, like I mentioned, living long distance from your mother. Um, and many times when the parent is elderly, um, low contact might look like tending to their care, administering that care is necessary, but not inviting your parent fully into your personal life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it involves an understanding that you don't have that friendship with your mother that we as daughters tend to crave.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm doing.
Mhm.
That's the journey that I just started on, the low contact journey. Um, yeah. And talking about that motherly love that we all crave, have you been able to find um, someone or something in your life that can fulfill that void that you have?
You know, I have to be really careful with that. I went through a period of time where I was searching for replacements for my parents, and it basically got me heartbreak and disappointment. And I feel ultimately that the best thing for me is to get that love from within, is to draw from my Heavenly Father what I don't get from my earthly parents, but also being secure enough in holding my space as a self orphan, to reach out for those pieces of a parent that I see in others, especially Black women. You know, there are Black women who have been presented to me by the universe that I'm very grateful for, who serve as these maternal figures, who give that leadership and that guidance. But I have to be okay with not having um, that person that is right there. That person that I'm attached to in the way that I would want to attach to my mother or to my father. And that's clarifying. I have a relationship with my dad, but I would say we're somewhere around low contact too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different dynamic in that relationship. Um, but I do have an aunt, my dad's sister, that I'm very close with, and so I do feel that I have some family ties. But I know that if I get too attached to any one person, it's almost asking the universe to take them away from me, because I can easily fall into codependency. I can lose sight of myself and my own boundaries because I have been so deeply conditioned by my mother to live that way. that is a boundary I have to be firm about. That I am my own parent. I am reparenting for myself. And fortunately, unfortunately, there's nobody who has that card in my life, that parent card. And that feels safe for me right now.
Wow, that's so deep. There's so much to unpack right there, because we all want some kind of parental guidance, love, support. But from what I hear you saying, it sounds like you're really in protection mode. You're in still heal and protect mode, because of the codependency. Um, what I will say is that I pray that if you are still yearning for that, that the universe will present someone to you and that you'll be ready when they are ready. Um, when I was also in my 30s, I luckily got a chance to meet my godmother. She's been in my life now for, I would say, probably about maybe about almost 15, about 13, 14 years. And she's been an amazing, amazing person in my life. It took some years for us to get as close as we are now. But we got there. And when I was going through my separation for 4.5 years without talking to my mom, my godmother really stepped up and helped to fill the void. I mean, nothing will ever really fill the void, but my godmother helped to soothe me in that way. And so I'm hoping that eventually you may be able to get to a point where you are presented with someone like that, and then that you'll be ready, because it takes a lot of vulnerability to open yourself back up and to be able to accept someone in your life like that. Like I said, it took years. Like I met my godmother, like I said, almost 13, 14 years ago. And I would say within the last 5 years or so was when we got really, really close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Man. Jesus, I just have so many things I want to ask you. Since you've been working with women and helping women, I would love to learn a little bit about how you go about doing that. You were saying that you do something called exposure therapy, inner child healing, and auricular. Is that how you pronounce it? Auricular
Yes.
acupuncture. Can you please talk a little bit about your the techniques, the things that you use to help women move beyond the trauma that they face through, from their mom?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So my go-to, the way that I start with all of my clients is with narrative journaling.
Mm.
So we work together at first to sort of open the floodgates of your memory, get you deeply in touch with your childhood, with um, resurfacing memories of abuse and of trauma involving your parents. And we try to identify the earliest point of abusive contact that you can remember, the
Mm.
earliest trigger, the earliest awareness that you had. That
Woo!
you could not trust your mother if that is the parent that we're focused on, or both if both parents are involved. And once we can sort of
Wow.
plot your experience with trauma on a timeline, we are able to take leverage over what you have experienced. We're then able to make the contact with your inner child at those various points of your life, to give her voice, to give her shape and identity, and to help you make connection with her. The, the, the trick in that is when we are abused by our parents, we tend to loathe our inner child. And embracing her after acknowledging all that she's been through is a challenge because we blame her for being abused. And we tend to hate her as though the abuse was her fault, because that is the best way that we can understand what has occurred. And so healing that fissure in the relationship then moves us to the stage where we're able to empty out your psyche of that trapped pain through auricular acupuncture. And that is a step that I reserve for clients who have already done a considerable amount of work, because the auricular acupuncture is very powerful and the results are overwhelming. So it's important that you have already taken steps to become comfortable with what you actively remember, because what has been repressed will then come to the surface and sort of fill in those gaps and add a layer of complexity that you were previously not ready for. So once we can fully expose you to your trauma, we can retrieve the inner child and integrate her into your life as an adult woman. You are free to move on and embrace whatever your journey has for you, wherever it may lead you.
Oh my gosh. I have a photo in my house of myself. I'm the oldest. I have a brother and a sister, a brother who's just 1 year younger, and my sister's 4 years younger. I have a photo in my house. I think I was probably about maybe a little, I had maybe about 5 years old. This photograph, the interesting thing about the fact that I even have this photograph is that I remember that particular instance when that photo was taken, the place where I was at. I even remember the location where I was at. It wasn't even my mother's house. So the fact that I remember where that photo was taken, I remember what I was feeling. Like on that photo, I'm not smiling at all. That's when I feel like that's the first instance that I can remember of my innocence being taken away, of my life and my relationship with my mother shifting. And it's interesting because I leave the picture up just as a reminder to how far I've come from there and where I'm not willing to go back. Can you talk a little bit more about the acupuncture? A lot of us Black people, we don't know about acupuncture, and we don't know what it will do for us. So can you talk a little bit more about what the acupuncture does?
Yes. So the auricular acupuncture involves a series of points in the ear, the outer and inner earlobe. It's about 6 different points. And the process itself is not painful. Your acupuncturist just inserts a needle into those different points. Usually your session is about 45 minutes to an hour. You lay back, you relax, you can sleep, you let your mind wander. The way the process works is that that puncture wound, the way that it feels is on the back end. When you're done with your session, when you're at home, back in your space, it's like you have punctured a tire and now the air is beginning to come out. So you're puncturing the surface of your emotional well-being, of your psyche, and those memories that you have repressed can now have a way to escape and come to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And so repressed memories, I think we hear about repressed memories, but you don't really know until it happens to you. You know, I my very first session with the regular acupuncture had me on the floor the same day, wailing and sobbing, just absolutely overwhelmed. It felt like a train was just running me over emotionally, just rapid awareness of a layer of my life, of my memory that I had, something I definitely remembered over the years. But the aspects of it that were too painful for me to process as a child, I blocked out. And so a lot of times what we do when we have that repressed pain that we're trying to understand, that we're trying to release, is our inner child takes over and she finds different ways to cause us to repeat these cycles. We end up in toxic partnerships, we end up with fake friends, we end up in these abusive jobs that exploit us. We end up going through the motions at a church where we're not valued or appreciated. And we try to understand, right? That's why you find yourself, I know I definitely did, feeling like, what's wrong with me? Why are my relationships like this? Why can't I have a normal relationship with my mother? Why do my friends treat me like this? Why does my partner treat me like this? Why do they all treat me like this?
Wow.
And it was getting to the root of the issue, right? The messages that were programmed into me by my parents as early as 5 years old to really understand why I'm tolerating abuse in my partnership. To really understand why I'm killing myself on a job that I hate for some mythical approval. Getting to the root of it allowed me to understand it and free myself. I no longer needed to repeat the cycle of abuse with a partner because I understand now. I understand what it was for. I came face to face, right? I exposed myself to the root of the trauma. I'm desensitized to it and I've taken power over it. So now I'm free to be happy. I don't have to make space for dysfunction because I'm no longer trying to understand it.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up this because I could keep on talking to you. I mean, there's so many things to talk about and so many things to unpack. But you just brought up a topic that I think may need to be unpacked a little bit. You were talking about relationships and how growing up with toxicity from your parents also impacts your relationships.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how you see some of your clients, some things that they've suffered through, in regards to love relationships?
Sure. So there are 5 spheres of narcissistic abuse, 5 different areas of our life where we will see it play out. And that is our home and our family, our career, our workplace, our friendships and our peer groups, our relationships and partnerships, and our church if we are religious.
Mm-hmm.
And it is absolutely one of the key indicators that a woman has been abused by her parent if she has a history of tolerating partners who are verbally, emotionally, and or physically abusive to her.
Wow. Wow.
Those abusive relationships, those bondages that we get ourselves into and then struggle to extract ourselves from, we want to leave, but we can't leave. That cycle is a playground for our inner child.
Wow.
She's so powerful. That's why it's necessary to confront and engage her, because otherwise she will hijack our lives. If while you may want to attract a man who loves you, that may be your conscious goal is to attract a man who loves you, that you love and will treat you well, mutual respect. What you're going to attract up until you do the work of exposure is someone who is familiar, someone who reminds you of your primary caregiver, your initial example of masculinity, if that's what, if you're dating men, and that will you'll choose someone who will invite you to repeat those same feelings, those same dynamics, and you'll agree to that treatment because you've already been conditioned to take it. The struggle, the rejection, the abuse feels right to you. And you validate it because you need it to help you understand, where did I learn this? Why does this feel acceptable to me? What is this? The pattern develops so that we can describe what it is that we're attracting, so we can sort of understand the atmosphere that we create around ourselves emotionally and begin to unpack it because we want to change it, right? If you want to be happy, if you want a harmonious partnership, you're going to be willing at some point to get into therapy and do the work and figure out how much of this is me, what do I need to take ownership of, how much of this is them, where am I going wrong here? And if you work with someone who is familiar with narcissistic abuse and with childhood trauma, they will very likely point you in the direction of your parents.
Mm. Wow. How can people get in touch with you if someone wants to work with you, Dani, for therapy, for coaching? What up? If somebody wants to work with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
The best way is to visit my website, ellisoninc.com. That's Ellison Inc. with a K.com. And you'll be asked to subscribe first. Then you're going to take a quiz that is, are you ready to break the cycle of maternal abuse for good? Take that quiz, and it will lead you to my calendar where you can book your first session. And that first session is just a blueprint planning session where we can surface what it is that you're dealing with, what your goals are, and assess that we are the right fit. And if so, come up with a plan for moving forward.
Wow. So you can see the link on the screen for those of you that are watching. I will put her link, Dani's link, in the show notes once the video is up and ready to for download on YouTube. This is beautiful. The work that you are doing is beautiful. I think is so needed. I just want to thank you.
You're very welcome. Women like you are the reason that I do what I do. I knew when I came full circle that it very nearly took me out, that I very nearly did not make it. If it were not for the divine grace of God, I would not have made it out of that journey.
Mm.
And I don't want other Black women to have to do that alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I want to also say is no contact is not a bad thing.
No, not at all.
Is not a bad thing. No contact is not a reason for you to have to feel guilty. I'm a empowerment speaker, and I remember a couple years ago, I had gone to a high school to do a presentation for parents, and I spoke about the necessity of parents supporting their children and things like that or whatever. And I did go into my situation just a little bit. After I was done talking, I had a woman come up to me who said, I can't believe that you're not talking to your mother. And I said, well, my situation it involves a lot of toxicity. I said, so me not talking to my mother is the best thing for me right now. And she really like went on this like guilt trip thing for me. Like she's like, I just can't believe it. That's your mother, blah, 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 blah. Right. So I want to anybody that is thinking about going no contact, I want you to know that you don't have to feel guilty. I want you to know that what other people say doesn't matter because they're not walking in your shoes. They didn't experience the things that you experienced.
That's right.
And so if you decide to go on that no contact journey, go on it with confidence. Go on it with knowing that, your life is going to get better from here.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I I love that you are stating no contact is not a bad thing
Hmm.
because it's really not.
Yeah.
Going no contact with your mother is not an attack on her. It doesn't mean she's a bad person or that you don't love her. It simply means that as an adult, she is not someone who is invited to your life, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And in fact, there are a number of us who have this black sheep anointing,
Hmm.
guys, and it simply requires that we go some places that our parents cannot go. And it's not in spite of them, it is for them. You
Mm.
go further without your mother than you can with her, trying to drag her along with you, because she's only going to let you go as far as she's comfortable with.
Mm.
Only going to let you go as far as she can identify with. So that means she's going to spend a lot of time dimming your light and breaking your confidence and challenging your identity, because if you were ever to connect with who you really are, you would leave her behind. You would put her to shame if she's competing with you. You would cause her to see some parts of herself that she might not be ready for up close and personal. But that is not a reason for you to stop yourself or limit your growth.
Wow. Wow. All right, ladies, we got some work to do. I still have some work to do. So, as I mentioned before, Dani was talking about a technique of low contact with parents. So, I decided to be on the low contact journey. And so, I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like for me. But please, if you are dealing with anything similar to this and you feel like you need some help, don't be afraid to reach out. Dani is an amazing example of how you can move beyond these things and get better. She's willing to work with you to help you get better. And so if you need someone to help you move through that journey, please, reach out to her. She would be a great person to do that. I am not shy about talking about the fact that I've been in therapy for a long time. And I continue to stay in therapy just to keep myself in check. And so please don't feel like you don't have anybody that you can talk to. Please talk to Dani or talk to a therapist, a psychologist or whomever you choose, but talk to someone because you can't do this. You can't do this journey by yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dani. It was such a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful talking with you, and I really appreciate being
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
here. Thank you, too.
Wow. That was beautiful. Um, this conversation was so hard for me because, as I mentioned in the introduction, I just started back talking to my mother after about 4.5 years of not speaking to her, uh, being estranged from her, and it's been tough. It's been tough for a lot of different reasons. However, I'm at a place in my life now where I don't accept toxicity in my life. I'm at a place in my life where if you can't fully love me, then you can't love me at all. And so I'm very serious about that, regardless if it's friends, if it's family, if it's a significant other, it doesn't matter who it is. If you can't fully love me the way that I deserve to be loved and allow me to love you the way that you deserve to be loved, then there's no reason for us to be in relationship. So I do want to give you some information. As you all know, I'm a scholar. I truly believe that it's important for you to always have some education, something that you can go back and take a look at. One of the books that helped me on my journey is a book called Toxic Parents: Overcoming Their Hurtful Legacy and Reclaiming Your Life by Susan Forward. I read that book several years ago. That book was really hard to get through. Susan Forward is so raw and real in that book and really breaks down um, the relationship that you may have with your parents, or you may have with someone else, another family member in your life. But this book is definitely one. It was published a long time ago. When I read it, probably 10 years ago, probably more than 10 years ago, that book was old and raggedy and falling apart and everything, but it was such a good book. So I definitely recommend the book Toxic Parents. Another thing that I'll recommend to you all is there's tons and tons and tons of literature on Google. If you type in toxic parents, or if you type in abusive parents, or if you type in estrangement, parent, estrangement, adult child, you'll get so many different articles that'll come up. And I'm going to share this one article that I found on a website called Parenting for Brain. It's an article that's titled 27 Signs of Toxic Parents. One sign is abuse. They are mentally abusive. They are physically abusive. They may use harsh punishment. They boast that they are someone that provides tough love. They gaslight. They enjoy humiliating their children. They are strict, critical, rigid. They lack emotional regulation. They are sensitive and easily offended. They show no affirmation. They are intrusive into your life. They are controlling. They don't want their children to have friends and other relationships besides them. They are manipulative. They use love as a weapon. They are cold and emotionally unavailable. They are unsupportive. They invalidate anything that you want to do in your life. They show no interest or respect for their children. They may be narcissistic. They believe that they're always right, even when they're wrong. They expect their children to read their minds. They see their children as extensions of themselves. They never apologize for anything, and they blame everybody else. If this sounds like any characteristics of your parents, then you may be someone who grew up with a toxic parent in your life. And if that is you, then please do the work so that you can move beyond and get better. Um, this episode and all the episodes that I do is about empowerment, is about healing, is about helping people move beyond where they are right now, so that they can become a better version of themselves. And so I'm hoping that this episode of the Black Beauty Activists podcast will help you move beyond into a new version of yourself. And so I just want to say thank you all for sitting with me today. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, my YouTube channel, the Black Beauty Activist Podcast. If you enjoyed this, please make sure that you leave me a like. Please make sure that you, leave a comment. I see there's some comments that are coming through. I'm on Spotify. If you are the kind of person that likes to listen to podcasts in the car or while you're doing chores or something like that, you can also find the Black Beauty Activist podcast on Spotify, as well as you can find us on Apple Podcasts. So again, I thank you for joining me this evening. This was a beautiful conversation that I'm hoping will help myself and many of you heal from any toxicity that you dealt with as a child. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. And always remember that on the other side of fear is your beautiful confidence. Have a good night, everybody.